Well, what a week, what a game, what games ahead of us. Wrapping up this World Cup 2025 here on the Women's Rugby Pod. We thought we'd get some proper experts to analyse, to pick the bones out of the two games coming up at the weekend. Of course, the bronze final, New Zealand against France, 12:30 and 4 o'clock, England against Canada in the World Cup final. Two people whose opinions I hugely rate. Rachel Taylor. How are we doing, Tails? You well?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for the full name check.
Yeah, lovely. No problem, Tails. Well, look, people might not know. Former Wales captain, and that's a proper Wales captain, 15s and all the rest of it. And Laura Jane Jones, broadcaster, a lady who's been in and around the women's game for many, many years. Lucky enough to work alongside her at Sky as well. LJ, how are we doing?
I'm great, Tamo. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. The one word I have, LJ, we haven't caught up with Tails. We've done a few of these pods, and I appreciate the shift you put in on the WRP. LJ, the word joyous seems to keep coming up in this World Cup. How's it been for you?
Yeah, it's been mega. It's been incredible. I was obviously lucky enough to be obviously I was lucky enough to be in New Zealand last time round when we really thought that women's rugby had arrived on the world stage in a way that it hadn't before, with Eden Park for the opener and then filling it for the final. And I was actually talking to a couple of the Black Ferns girls. I was talking to Rua Haydemont about this earlier in the tournament, and we look back now and that feels so small comparative to what this has been. This has been joyous is one word. I would actually probably describe it as overwhelming. And I think that fans have had a fantastic experience, but for many of us who have been in and around the women's game for a long time, and certainly for a lot of the players who are not at their first Rugby World Cup, it has been quite overwhelming. And it's the onus is now on the rest of the world to keep up with what England Rugby World Cup and World Rugby have done at this tournament, because it has been nothing short of incredible.
Yeah, totally, utterly agree. Yeah, I packed plenty of tissues for that first weekend up in Sunderland and beyond, and I've already put a few packs of tissues in the bag for the weekend because, yeah, I think they're going to be needed. As you say, yeah, if you've been in and around it a while, none of these, been in it a couple of years, and oh, this is amazing, isn't it? Look where we've got to. Stuff that keeps filling our social medias. Anyway, look, let's get into the ruggers. Just a quick word from each of you on the two semi-finals. Of course, um, Canada got through 34-19 against New Zealand. Tales. What did you make of that performance? 70-0 up after 24 minutes, 31-7 after 44 minutes. The game was done then, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was absolutely class. I think when they've had the tagline of like dark horses, I've not really been able to understand why. I don't think they really got tested or got out of second gear in the pool stages. If I'm really honest, don't think we saw them at their full potential. Like I thought the way they came out and the physicality, intensity at which they played at, but like just their sheer ruthlessness as a squad, like 1 to 23, that that was a huge statement, I think, in this World Cup. A massive statement, massive shot fired at England. I thought they were insane. They dropped off a little bit, obviously, in the second half, and like the discipline stuff, not to concede penalty and whatever it was, first 50, 60 minutes is just absolutely class. And they'll need to do exactly the same thing against England because they won't want to give them a platform. But I just thought that game was everything I wanted. It was the reaction from New Zealand. It was the start from Canada. Just a great game from minute 1 to minute 80.
LJ?
Echo everything that Tails says. I think that to be statistically faultless for 61 minutes, that was the point at which Amy Barrett there finally put her arm up in New Zealand's favour, and they were textbook, weren't they? I think the big thing for me, and you say that, Tails, about when people have said they're underdogs and dark horses and stuff. There's a smugness this week. Every conversation I've had with men who've watched the Rugby World Cup and people going into the Rugby World Cup asking who would win, and I've been very quick to say, oh, Canada will win this Rugby World Cup. I've said that. for a long time. And this is the final that many of us who've watched these two teams over the past couple of years will have predicted. We knew which way the competition was going to go and who would face who at different points. And they have been incredibly strong coming into this Rugby World Cup, and they've shown that they have a way that they want to play. And I think Kevin Ruiz deserves incredible plaudits for the way that not only he's coaching this team, but the way that he set this program up in terms of using the sevens program and really utilizing the PWR. But I think in terms of Friday night's game, they're ruthless in their transition. And I'm not sure anyone can live with that.
Yeah. Thanks for the test saying you called it, Tails. With Canada went, but I think you're both absolutely right. It was pretty much faultless for 60 minutes. Tactically, absolutely on the nose. Physical, even in defence, just incredibly physical. Attack, just so many strings to the bow in the way that they can attack you. And look, we'll get into England and how Canada will attack England in just a second. Let's go to England then. Look at that, seamless, like a ski sock into that semi-final. 35-17 against France, 7-5 at half-time. Far more sticky for England, and possibly we expected that from France against England and the week that France had LJ.
Yeah, I think, John Mitchell, very kind of cliche post-match in terms of, I asked him whether the value of a game like that, but, for England, they have been largely untested at this Rugby World Cup and not through being, they are a world-class team, but just their route to the final, they have picked off easier teams. And France brought a lot more than I expected them to. I've done all but one of France's games at this tournament so far, and they've been less than convincing. But they just played it so well on the weekend. And there were parts where I think in the second half tactically, they probably went off the boil a bit and lost a little bit of the edge that they'd had early on. But England came up with answers where they needed to. Their forward pack were in the loose, incredible. Hannah Bottoman putting her fingers up 3 turnovers, and Meg Jones being quite confused about the 13 on her back, and thinking perhaps she had a 7 instead in terms of the work that she did around the park. I think that if we look at those two semi-finals, Canada looked the stronger of the two sides, but it's only against the side they're playing, and that's where this Saturday is mouth-watering.
As a coach, Tails, which game would you wanted your team to play in? Tough one against France or faultless performance against? Which is better preparation for a final?
That's a really good question, Hamo. I think.
Thanks so much.
I love a question like that. It makes me actually like. Yeah, England needed a test, and I'm really glad France provided that, particularly in the first half. I think France will look back on the whole tournament and be a little bit disappointed. Didn't really hit, I don't think, the potential that they've got, and they left a number of chances out there against England, which I think they'll look back on, reflect, and be really disappointed about. I think if you're England, you needed the little scare. You needed, like LJ says, you needed to find a plan B. Or revert to plan A, if that makes sense, or revert to type, which they did from a forwards point of view. I think some of their big stage players massively stepped up in that game. So if you're an England coach, you're like, this is good because they're coming into really good form. They are relishing the occasion of being in front of that crowd, and they're excelling, which I think is really good. But I suppose if you're looking for where your team is tracking, then you'd probably be happier with a Canadian performance, like across the park. But I think both games were really good tests and exactly what they needed. Because like I said, I don't think Canada really got out of like second gear. So it's good to see where they are. I just think it was a really different response from both teams, like after the game, like kind of like how humble Canada seemed to be and sort of how England seemed to still just be riding this wave of celebration. It just seems a really different contrast, which again, I think when we think about the weekend, it's so exciting to see how that's going to pan out.
What's interesting about that, Tails, I think we talk about, there's this sporting cliche of teams that come to spoil the party. that's never been truer than this weekend in Canada. And that post-match scenes at Ashton Gate of England players up in the stands receiving friendship bracelets and gifts and paintings and all these different things that the fans had done for them. It felt like a party. It felt like being, and I don't mean this any kind of patronizing way, it felt like being at a kids' party, because they were entertainers and this is what we want from rugby. This is what we want from sport. We want these icons, these athletes to be entertainers. We are in the business of entertainment. And I don't think that there's a team in men's rugby, women's rugby, anywhere in the world that are entertaining in the way that England are. Ellie Kildun scoring tries that every kid can look at and understand why that was so good. Hannah Bottoman, just making sure that those new fans understand that she's made 3 turnovers. That's what you're watching there. She's helping the new fans. Let's kind of treat it like that. And then post-match, them being so involved in the fans and really giving back. And it can look like, they're, oh, look at us, the Red Roses, we're the best team in the world. But the other side of it is it's being gracious. And I really loved seeing that. I loved seeing kids so excited by it. And I have to tell this story about my highlight on Saturday post-match of kids being so overawed by these rugby player icons and watching these 3 French girls wait for the England players to come round to have pictures. And then they walked up the stand with their father and spotted Ilona Maher. And they got very, very excited. And I waved at their dad and called them up so they could have a picture with Ilona Maher. And their father was iconic French hooker, Benjamin Kayser, one of my favourite players. A drawer full of runners-up medals in the European Cup for Leicester and Clermont-Auvergne. And his girls could not care less about their father's illustrious international and club career, but they had their photos taken with Ellie Kildun and Ilona Maher, and those girls are like Taylor Swift to them. And that's where women's sport is, and that's what that felt like post-match for me, and it was so special. And that's where, when we say women's rugby has arrived, if we talk about metrics of viewership and full stadiums, it's the iconography of these players and what that can mean for the progress of this sport now.
I mean,
I love that. Sorry, I mean.
No, you carry on.
I was going to say, I love how it's progressing as well. Like players, you've had the story of the women who created the World Cup, right? Like you've had that. So you've seen that be like the underlying sort of start to this ripple. And then you've had players pre my generation or my generation where we fought for professionalism of the game. So you've layered that on. And then now you've got players who are professional, who have embraced where it needs to go next. And I think you're right, how some of them have engaged with the fans and creating this lasting legacy, I think is just, it's incredible. And you talk about the emotion of it, Johnnie, some of those stories are the best stories to come out. And it could be an engagement with a fan, or it could be sharing their background. We've heard stories from across the world from players that are just insane about what they've put in to get to where they are. I just love how it's always moving. Every sort of playing generation has chosen to drive it onto another level. And I just think it's class. I think that's just something so special about women's sport. That's just been a real highlight this tournament.
If I can just narrow the focus ever so slightly, and it's a difficult question because we don't know, none of us have been there, but there is a line of thought that Canada played their final. It's all set up for England. As you say, going to the crowd, it's friendship bracelets, it's paintings, it's all the rest of it, and it's Barbie, it's the Spice Girls, it's it's which is all phenomenal. And then you get into a stadium and it's 82,000 people expecting you to win. How suffocating do we think that may be? Because if Canada come out in the first 17 minutes, 24 minutes and put 20, 24 points, 17 points, whatever on England, that then becomes a very, very quiet stadium, and that then itself then becomes really, really weird for England and the Red Roses. How much pressure is it going to be at Twickenham? As I say, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to imagine. Has it all been too much for England? Is it too much distraction? LJ?
I don't think it's distraction. I don't think it's distraction, and I say this with all due respect to male athletes. I think women have far more EQ, and I think that's true of female athletes as well. I don't think it's a distraction. I think that they've dealt with it really well. And I don't think that England have, despite having a home crowd, they've got as much pressure on them as they've had at the last two Rugby World Cups. Let's face it, England should win every Rugby World Cup if we go on the metrics of resource. And I don't just mean in terms of funding, but player numbers. There are more women playing rugby in England than there are anywhere else. So, if we look at those metrics, England should win every Rugby World Cup. They have pressure on their shoulders. I'd like to hope that John Mitchell's got 2 jobs this week, hasn't he? He's got to look at that side of it and look at where perhaps he can use players like Abby Ward, who were there last time, and the events of that final, the events leading into it, the pressure of the coaching setup last time round. I think John Mitchell has been very open about them being favourites, and of course, this is their Rugby World Cup to lose. But I think last time around, if you look at the language that Simon Middleton went into that Rugby World Cup with, it was a different kind of pressure. He said in a Telegraph article pre-tournament, anything less than winning this is failure. So I think that they've built the pressure differently. They've got pressure to perform. They've got pressure to inspire. But I think they've managed the pressure around winning it, certainly externally, quite well, and only they know what the messaging is in camp. I think John Mitchell's bigger challenge this week is how to play against Canada, and I don't think there's any risk that Canada played their cup final last week. I don't think Canada have been physically challenged by anyone, and I don't think the Black Ferns did that last week. I don't think anyone has kept up with how they play at the breakdown. Their speed of transition is obscene. It's terrifying, and they are so far ahead of everyone with that. They are calculated. I think Alex Tessier has been fantastic. I think that these England players know these Canada players well, but the way that they play for Canada is different to the way that any of them play in their PWR sides. John Mitchell has got to be confident that this weekend England have a plan B and they have a plan C. And what do those plans look like? Does that look like Hail Marys? Does that look like Meg Jones going to 10 if they need to because they're 20 points behind with 20 minutes left? What are their plans this weekend? And I think that's the biggest test. The biggest test this weekend is on John Mitchell, not just his players.
Where's it won and lost, Tales?
I'm just thinking about some like last conversation. I think it was Peltier, wasn't it? It was like we've been hustling in the dark and now it's time to get into the light. And we talk about like the different approaches to this game. We talk about the different pressures. Don't think Canada have that pressure on them externally at all. But I do think they drive it from within, which is really interesting when you talk about or listen to a lot of like their post-match interviews. It's very much like, we've done this, yes, but the job's not done yet. And it's everything is prepped for that final, right? I think I'd agree again, LJ, like I don't think they have been tested physically for 80 minutes. So that's going to be really interesting to see where the strength and depth of the England squad, particularly in the forwards, plays its part when you think like it's 2 amazing front rows England have got now. Like, where does that take its toll? Like, I think Danica Menon has been insane for Canada. So like, can they replicate that again? I love the way they play. They just create space, right? So rugby is an evasion game. It's about playing to space. And I just think their ability to scan and identify and create that is a real mix. I think what we saw against New Zealand was when they created those chances, they executed them. They have to do that in the big pressure moments in the final. I think that could be a test. I certainly think they'll create them. It's just, I think, again, like, how do England then respond? Is it to type? If they give them a platform, England will love it. If they take that away and their discipline's the same, then that could be a really exciting first 20, 40 minutes with everything to play for the next 40. So, and I think you're right, Johnny, like if you don't get out the blocks and you're England, like, does the pressure mount? At what point do you start panicking that it's not going to plan? And I think you're right, like the crowd will be huge in this game. Like, we've seen what it does to England. We've seen what it does to Red Roses. We've seen how they can thrive off it. It could end up playing like the major part of the whole game.
And that side of things as well. Sorry, Johnny, but I actually want to ask you a question on this. In that, we're talking about England are used to playing in that stadium. They've played there a number of times now, and they are used to having big crowds. And I think that they will thrive with that. I don't think it will have a negative pressure. But I wonder how Canada will deal with that, because it is going to be loud, it's going to be full. Johnny, you and I did an England Canada game in that stadium when there were about 4,000 people watching after a men's game in, I want to say, 2017.
Yeah,
Harry Mills was player of the match. I can't work out what year it was. It was like 17 or 18, and there was no one there. And Canada just aren't going to be used to games like this. And I think for them, that's a tougher test. I think England living up to hype, I think these girls thrive on it. I think they love it. I don't think that they are going to have that nerves of this expectant crowd behind us. But I think Canada could struggle with, I was talking to Alicia Quirk yesterday, and she was talking about playing sevens at Twickenham as an Aussie side in probably around 2016, 17, 18, who'd never played in front of big crowds, and going out to do a warm-up and realizing that they couldn't hear each other's calls, and that they'd have to create some hand signals very quickly in the changing room, and how prepared are Canada for how loud this stadium's going to be on Saturday, and how on their back they're going to be.
Yeah, but I think that's the whole theme of it for them.
Yeah, plays into their narrative, doesn't it?
100% it plays into their narrative.
Gladiator
The lion hunts the deer. The lion will often win because it needs food, but the deer is fighting for life, and that's the mantra of Canada. And having Sophie DG on the pod a few weeks ago, and she's just as polished off the field as in front of a microphone as she is on the field. She's just an exceptional human being. Her mum's pretty cool too. And she said she used the word entitlement. And I think that runs through everything they do. Everybody's entitled. They've got it all thrown on a plate for them. Look at us. We've had nothing. And Kevin plays into that. And Steph de Goede was in one of the shirt presentations with Kevin Ruiz, and she said there are hairs on the back of her neck, and he doesn't come across as that kind of person, but behind closed doors he is incredibly inspirational. And I think that crowd plays into I agree with the technical bits and pieces in terms of calls and stuff, but I think it totally plays into their narrative. It's fascinating. Ladies, we've been on a long time. We could talk about it for days, couldn't we? We really could. Just very, very quickly, we're not expecting many changes from either, are we? Personally, I play Lucy Packer. I think it increases the ball plays for England's backline, but I don't think Mitchell will do that. I think he'll stick with Mo Hunt for leadership. But Canada won't change anyway.
I think Jess Breach is his biggest risk.
I totally agree. Claudia McDonald should be.
I can't see him bringing Claudia in, but I think if there's one player in that England team who will be feeling pressure this week, her tackle completion across the tournament, I think, has been around 40%. That Canada back three, and if Kevin Ruiz, they're not particularly kicking wingers, are they? If he swaps them around, imagine Asia running at Jess this weekend, and that she's got a big job this weekend, Jess Breach. Big days call for big players, and she's really got to. She might have a try record, but she's got to show what she can do for the rest of her team in defence this weekend.
Who wins tails?
Oh, dreading you saying that.
Yeah, come on. You only got a minute left. You don't have to give me a score. Red Roses. Oh, that hurts as a Welsh lady, doesn't it? LJ?
Women's rugby is the winner here.
Oh, get off the fence. Splinters. Who wins?
I'll have my Canada oven mitts on as long as Denise brings them from Vancouver for me. I think Canada.
Yeah, and I've been Canada all the way
through. Meg Jones, World Rugby Player of the Year.
Nah, Sophie de Goede. They're going to sweep the board. And Canada win. Got to stick with them. Have done all tournament. Ladies, absolute pleasure. Can't wait to see you both at the weekend. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.